Hi, subscribe to Revenge Tale not to miss new stories. Tom was diligently engaged in fresh test data, boring but vital tasks for him and his team, who had been working on a test car for a month. Despite her boredom, he found himself consolidating and organizing information for analysis. In the middle of the task, his phone flashed a text message notification, but he paid little attention to the sender. It was only after a break from work that he looked away from the screen and noticed the alert. His curiosity was aroused. He picked up the phone and saw an unfamiliar number with a local code. Although he was tempted to classify it as spam, he changed his mind, thinking that it might not be his colleague's registered mobile number. He had the thought that it might be his colleague's unregistered mobile number. Upon opening the message, his initial confusion turned to shock when he saw the clearly obscene image on the screen. It took him a little time to process the unexpected content. A close-up of a woman's body parts, in which recent ejaculation was clearly visible. After reading the accompanying text, "If you look closely, you still have time. Bradley." 6 texts. He first attributed it to a mistaken attempt at seduction, finding a hint of fun in the situation. However, a closer inspection of the image revealed a small detail that made him freeze with disbelief. A mole near the female intimate parts, undoubtedly belonging to his wife Tanya. Doubt screamed in his mind as he desperately tried to refute what he had seen, but the evidence only reinforced his conviction. Questions swirled in my head about where Tanya really was, on her way to Boston for an important work event. However, here he was, faced with an image that said the opposite. Approaching 17:15, the time of the message did not coincide with Tanya's planned arrival in Boston at 16:30, and although she usually called upon arrival, it was likely that she was busy organizing her team. Despite the storm of emotions, Tom decided to respond to the message first before taking any further action. Not particularly original, but fully expected. "Who is it? How did you get this image? Do you expect me to meet you at Bradley's?" While he was getting ready to finish his day, he firmly decided to go to Bradley's. He was determined to get answers any way he could by sending a message to Tanya. "How was the flight? I'm going to have a snack. Call me when you're free." He intended to keep everything low profile and discreetly collect information. Walking to his car, his phone started flashing again. Assuming it was Tanya, he checked the phone and found the reply of the sender of the mysterious message. "I'll be there, but I'm sure you'll find someone more interesting than me." Feeling depressed, he hurried to his car, looking at the map on his phone. The Bradley was a 30-minute drive away, and it was already 5:40 p.m. He arrived a little after 18 o'clock, not knowing the exact importance of the time, but hoping that he would not miss who the sender of the message expected from him. During the trip, his phone flashed again, this time with a message from Tanya. "Crazy time with the team. We'll call you later before going to bed. Love you." He put aside thoughts of their conversation, his attention focused on the meeting at Bradley's and the mystery surrounding the sender's knowledge of his wife. Arriving at 6:12 p.m., his heart was racing as he parked. Since the sender of the message did not provide any clues about who to pay attention to, he assumed that the one who wanted to meet knew him and would approach him. However, what bothered him most was the mention that there would be someone more interesting there. The sender of the message seemed to be the owner of information that he did not possess, and he was afraid of falling into a trap without other ways to find out the truth. The image of his wife's private part left him in turbulence. He trusted her completely, and their closeness satisfied him, or so he thought. But the only explanation for someone possessing such an image was anxiety, and he was minutes away from discovering the truth, which filled him with horror. Once inside, he let his eyes adjust to the dark lighting. Unfamiliar with the location of the pub, he paused at the entrance to explore the area. There was a spacious dining room in front and a bar on the left. Choosing a spot near the end of the bar, he ordered a Christmas beer and looked around the dining room. His attention was caught by a man who had just accepted his drink order and was heading across the room to a table with smiling people. And so, at the table, receiving a drink from an elegantly dressed man, Tanya was sitting, decorated with her little black dress and pearls, her smile shining. He moved mechanically, approaching the table where Tanya was sitting. A few steps away from her, her expression changed to wide-eyed fear at the sight of him. Without stopping, Tom continued to move, reaching the table and grabbing the elegantly dressed man's hair with his left hand. He pulled back sharply, causing the man to drop the drinks and stumble backwards, crying out in pain. As Tom dragged him along, he let go of his grip, intending to hit him with his right hand. But the man's quick retreat left Tom out of reach, and he landed on the floor before Tom could do anything else. Taking a step towards him, Tom recognized Pete and sternly asked him not to get up. Pete, disheveled and soaked in alcohol, obeyed without saying a word. Turning to Tanya, Tom noticed that the table was suddenly silent. Familiar faces looked at him, members of Tanya's team, with whom they shared meals and gatherings at Tom's house. He reflected that loyalty to the team outweighed betrayal, except for one person who decided to reveal the truth. After briefly thinking about identifying them, he dismissed the idea as useless. Tom informed Tanya that he was going home and suggested to her that if there was any hope for their marriage, then she should go with him now. Tanya nodded in response. However, before she got up, he motioned for her to wait and asked for a few minutes. Before leaving, he turned to Betty Wilson and Bob Thornton, who were sitting nearby. He asked Betty if Bill thought she was in Boston, and Bob if Alice believed the same thing. Their evasion confirmed his suspicions. He wondered if the entire team was involved, realizing that at least one of them was. The ride home was a blur and ended up in his driveway. Once inside, he took a beer and sat down in the living room, thinking about his acquaintances. He was familiar with Bill Wilson and Alice Thornton, but unfamiliar with the other married couples present. With doubt nagging at him, he considered contacting Bob or Alice, but ultimately decided against it. Instead, he sent them a short message. "I just heard that Tanya's travel plans have changed. Maybe it's worth sticking with it." With that, he left the choice of further investigation in their hands, feeling a sense of completion amidst the chaos. About 20 minutes later, he heard the garage doors open and Tanya drive into the garage. He was waiting in the living room. She came in, still wearing her little black dress, but without the provocative shoes and jewelry. When she calmly entered the living room and sat down opposite him on the sofa, he was silent, understanding the power of silence in any conversation. He deliberately let the silence last as long as it took. Tanya didn't need to think long to speak. "It's not what you think," she began, but he made a gesture to silence her. "You have no idea what I think about the events of this evening," Tom replied. "I don't need a detailed explanation. We are both engineers, and we know that there is no real or objective answer to the question why. Often this is just an attempt to justify adverse outcomes, so I won't ask why. Let's start with something simpler. How long? How many times? With what frequency? Do our friends know, other than those who cheat at the table? Will I be considered a devoted man among your work colleagues and our friends?" "No, Tom, it's not like that," Tanya objected. "Our team plans were disrupted, and instead of coming home to travel again tomorrow, Pete suggested that we stay in town for one day before resuming." "Didn't I see the whole team where the others were?" Tom asked. "When we received the news, some of the team decided to stay at home one more night and meet us at the airport tomorrow," she admitted. "But you chose to deceive me," he pointed out. "You seemed close enough to Pete. Is there anything going on between the star engineer and the genius program manager that you would like to tell me?" "Well, first of all, Pete is fine, and he convinced the owners in Bradley not to sue me," she said with a positive tone. His eyes widened in utter disbelief at her loyalty. "I don't care about your colleague. If he hadn't stumbled, I would have hit him. Whether charges will be filed doesn't bother me. I've spent a night in jail before. It doesn't matter. Besides, it can be an interesting indication. he added with a half-smile. "Do you love him?" Tanya thought about it, gathering her thoughts. He could tell she was thinking. Yes, silence was indeed a powerful tool, and his mind was rushing to fill the void in their conversation. Again, it didn't seem like it was going to end well. "He's not my boyfriend. There is absolutely nothing between us. Yes, I should have told you about the change of plans, but it seemed trivial. You weren't expecting me in the city or in Boston, and I was still committed to the team. We just had dinner before going to the rooms. There was no reason for you to act like that," she exclaimed, trying to bluff her way out of the situation. He unlocked his phone, called up a text, and handed it across the coffee table to her. Judging by her expression, he understood that she remembered the photo and the situation, leaving no room for denial. This time, she began to speak without bravado. He took out his phone, launched the voice recording app, and put it in his shirt pocket. Tom hesitated, trying to find the right words. "Our team is very close-knit in many ways," he said. "Most of us have a small group that meets regularly, and we were all at Bradley's. We were the ones who put in extra effort for the proposal." Tanya nodded, acknowledging his words. "I don't know exactly when it started," she admitted, "but it was sometime after Pete became the project manager. We worked closely together, and I was drawn to him. Things just evolved." Tom interrupted her, not needing any further explanations. "Falling into bed doesn't just happen," he said firmly. "Decisions are made consciously. We both understand that, so please don't insult me." Tanya sighed, realizing that he was right. "Almost 6 months," Tom answered one of his own questions. "That's when Pete joined, right?" "Yes," Tanya nodded again. "The whole team, collectively." "Pete mentioned that it fosters trust and team unity," Tom said, trying to understand. "Is that what convinced all of you to form a company quotient group?" Tanya's face turned serious, and she rebuked him. "Now you're being crude. It's more than that. I feel a strong connection to Pete and my team, more than ever." Tom felt a sense of trouble brewing. "Unfortunately, you may see some changes in your team soon," he warned. "What did you do?" Tanya gasped, fearing the worst. "Tom, involving others will only cause more damage," she pleaded. "Let them make their own choices. We need to focus on us." "I can't stay silent and be complicit," Tom replied, his voice filled with concern. "I care about Bob and Alice. In fact, I like them a lot more than Betty and Bill right now. I texted them about the changed plans. How they handle it with their spouses is up to them. I can live with my decision." Tanya's frustration grew, and she raised her voice. "Tom, we have the most productive team in Cromerica Incorporated's history," she practically yelled. "And you benefited too. Just because our team meetings were on Wednesdays didn't mean you missed out. I never denied you access to me whenever you needed it. So I slept with my team a bit earlier. You never noticed." Tom listened in shock as Tanya's confession unfolded. The extent of the deception and his own ignorance became clear to him. Anger welled up within him, matching Tanya's rising anger. "Just because your fragile ego is bruised, you want to throw away all that my team and I have achieved," Tanya hissed. "Now you know the truth, and you want to give up." Tom felt his heart racing, his anger growing with each passing second. He considered forgiving Pete but quickly dismissed the idea. He didn't need to hear any more, but Tanya persisted. "No, sir," she said, her tone intense. "We won't let you off the hook. You're going to text Bob and Alice back, informing them of our situation. Tell them that we're stranded in Atlanta but have reservations for the morning. That's the story Betty and Bill will stick to, and you're going to support them. There are millions on the line with this deal," Tanya continued, her voice pleading. "Your hurt feelings mean absolutely nothing. Send the text, and then we can discuss our next steps." Tom retorted angrily, "There's no discussing it. You're leaving. Now, you and your twisted team, including Pete, can carry on however you like. We're finished." Tanya's tone softened as she pleaded, "Tom, please send those texts. If we lose Betty or Bill before the presentation, the company could lose millions. You and I could miss out on significant commissions and bonuses. Just imagine all the places we could go with that money, just you and me. Please, Tom, don't let some irrational concern about meaningless encounters derail us. I want to achieve executive status, and you want that for us too, don't you? Leave, Tanya, Tom managed to say before he was struck from behind, knocking the breath out of him as he fell to the floor. He felt a knee pressing into his back, pinning him down. Tanya quickly intervened. "Don't hurt him too much," she warned Pete. Pete leaned in close to Tom's face, taunting him. "Still undecided about breaking my nose, huh?" Tom thought to himself, realizing the extent of the deception surrounding him. "Now I know which side she's really on. We'll see whose nose breaks," Pete growled contemptuously. "Take his phone and type those damn texts instead. We don't have time for this nonsense." Someone picked him up from the floor, just one person. He pretended to be injured, forcing the person behind him to make considerable efforts to help him stand up. This gave him the information he needed. His captor was a weak office worker, breathing heavily from the efforts made to get Tom back on his feet. Tom was recovering from the surprise and focusing on the situation. Unlike Pete and his team of well-equipped salesmen, Tom's team worked in the field with the 160th Region's Special Operations Aviation Regiment, based at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Although his group of engineers did not match their level, spending time with the crews during test missions led to the invitation of the team to improve their physical fitness under the guidance of experienced specialists flying missions in aircraft modified by Tom's team. If these people showed up on your doorstep, it meant that your days on Earth were numbered. Tom and his team have developed the necessary equipment to access, and more importantly, get out of dangerous places. They were proud of their modifications, contributing to successful missions and the safe return of all participants. The members of the 160th and their imposing passengers greatly appreciated the hard work done by Tom's team. Especially Master Sergeant Troy Baker stood out for his intimidating appearance. Master Sergeant Baker was well known in his community. Everyone, from recruits to high-ranking officers, showed him the respect he deserved for leading his men through missions around the world. His fame was cemented during his mission to Colombia. Master Sergeant Baker ordered the young lieutenant commander of the squad to stick close by. During their first mission, when the group was ambushed by the FARC, Master Sergeant Baker thought that the lieutenant was doing well for a beginner, until he saw him lying on the ground and bleeding from his head. The medic reported that he had checked his vital signs and said that he had died. Baker knelt down and lifted him onto the fire escape, and the medic repeated that he was dead. Baker responded to the medic's comment by saying that it might be true, but he would bring him home anyway. The medic looked at him as if he had lost his mind. Considering that they were waiting for more than 5 kilometers back to the landing site through a dense forest, they still had to return unharmed, but carrying a dead person with them seemed like a risky decision. Anticipating the medic's thoughts, Baker assured him, "I would do the same to you, Billy. Be there if I need help." The subsequent events became legendary. Upon returning to the base, the medic informed the doctor that the lieutenant had died. The doctor nodded and took out a hand torch. The medic watched in amazement as the dead lieutenant's pupils reacted to the bright light of the flashlight. Then the doctor asked the medic if he wanted to reconsider his diagnosis, while they hurriedly sent the resurrected lieutenant for surgery. He was permanent. He didn't talk much, but when he did, everyone listened. He was a relic. In the age of convenience and disposable items, he was neither one nor the other. He was carefully crafted and unique, and seemed to cherish Tom and his team especially. During the long periods of downtime between missions, the Master Sergeant expressed his gratitude by teaching Tom and the team some basic but effective self-defense techniques. He advised engineers, "It's better to know something, just in case. I understand that the biggest threat you are likely to face is a faulty copier or unpleasant paper cutting. But if you stay on this path of work, you may find yourself in some interesting places. So now, if you happen to run into the local bright inhabitants, you will have something practical to count on, the master sergeant explained to the group. But let's hope that paper cutting will remain the scariest thing you will have to face. Tom regulated his breathing and allowed himself to appear subordinate in the arms of his captor, recalling the fighting techniques that the master sergeant had taught him. There may be situations when you feel helpless and can only survive a beating. It's unfortunate, but it happens. The main thing to remember is that even being beaten, you can still fight. You just need to surpass your striker. Tom remembered the lesson and resisted imperceptibly, gradually weakening the strength of the only man. "Give me the phone, Tom," Pete demanded, looking into his eyes. "Now you know that I was with your wife and that every guy on the team had access to her. Forget about this strong guy act, Tom. You're just a weak, obedient nerd. Do as I say, and maybe you'll still have a chance with Tanya when the team doesn't use her. And don't forget about all the amenities that you can afford thanks to her bonuses. This should ease the pain. Maybe Tanya will even buy you a coordinated robot for those times when she is busy." Tom bit his tongue when Pete enjoyed humiliating him and forcing him to obey. Pete demanded to know where it was, noticing the outline of the phone in Tom's shirt pocket. Then he reached out to get it. Tom stepped back decisively, striking with the heel of his right foot, hitting him on the shin of his captor, causing pain. Straining his muscles, Tom freed himself from the grip as his captor groaned and fell from his own weight. Pete's eyes widened at the admission. Developing his right arm, Tom rolled his shoulder as the major had taught him, and with frantic force, his clenched fist crashed into the center of Pete's face. He felt bones breaking under his fist as blood gushed from Pete's nose, throwing him to the floor. He turned around to identify his attacker. It was Bill, lying on the floor in tears and clutching his leg. He lamented that he thought his leg was broken. Tom stomped on his foot with force, causing Bill to scream in agony. Tom remarked that this should dispel all doubts. Turning his attention back, he saw Pete on the floor, hands covering his face, trying to get to his knees. Approaching him, Tom approached his ear and mentioned that his nose seemed to have taken a blow, adding that he was not ready to take it for a team. He then hit Pete hard on the temple, immediately stunning him. His adrenaline is bursting and his breathing is ragged. Tom looked around the living room in search of Tanya. Suddenly, he felt a sharp blow to his back and neck. Dropping to one knee, he turned to face the new attacker. Tanya stood in front of him, holding a grater from a cast iron frying pan. Her punch missed, grazing Tom's side. Rising to his feet, he roughly grabbed the pan from her hands. Tanya begged Tom, saying they could still save the situation. She asked him to consider the money he would deny himself and promised to stop extramarital affairs, promising to cut them off. She suggested going back to how it was between them. Rubbing the back of his head with his left hand, Tom stared at her, startled by her sudden transformation. He compared her to the changeable alien from John Carpenter's Alien, adjusting to each new challenge. He grinned at the thought. Misunderstanding his smile as agreement, Tanya went to hug Tom. He pushed her away with his left hand. And then, after a brief moment of thought, he quickly hit her on the nose with his right hand, breaking the bone, but not knocking her unconscious. Tanya screamed and fell to the floor. Tom noticed that it hurt like hell, describing tears, misted eyes, shortness of breath, and very blood, saying that it works every time. Tanya expressed her concern by asking about Tom's motives for hitting her. Tom, unapologetic, explained that he hit her because he could do it. He continued to record the incident, confident that he had enough evidence to justify his actions, despite the potential negative image. Reflecting on the advice he received from the major about decisive action, Tom looked around the room, noticing Bill's shocked state and Tanya's attempts to stop the nosebleed. On the move, when others remained motionless, Tom acknowledged success in saving people, giving the major credit for it. Discussing the consequences, Tom expressed his disappointment over the consequences for Lover and Yam Bill, regretting the missed opportunities and potential financial losses. He was thinking about the consequences of involving the police, deciding to postpone the call in order to preserve his ability to interrogate Tanya. Standing next to her, Tom demonstrated how to stop her nosebleed, but as the adrenaline subsided, he felt a sudden loss of energy sitting across from the woman he thought he knew. He expressed his doubt about her actions, asking himself about the true extent of Tanya's deception, expressing disappointment at the betrayal. He inquired about her aspirations, specifically referring to her desire to become vice president. Tanya admitted that it could have been valuable if Tom had gone along with her plans, expressing regret for the obstacle caused by the incident. Tom continued to ask questions about the future of their relationship and the sustainability of the deception, to which Tanya acknowledged the possibility and potential continuation of the lie. Tom learned from Tanya that Pete had warned her about his strict ethical principles and idealistic views, advising her to free herself from his influence in order to achieve success. In response to Tom's question about when Pete passed on this advice, Tanya replied, hinting at his ignorance of some aspects of their relationship. Despite Tom's silence, Tanya continued to share her point of view about moving up the career ladder. She admitted that following Tom's career advice earned her only a few plaudits, and it was only through Betty's advice that she learned what actually works for women in the workplace. Tanya claimed that participating in carnal relationships to advance her career was not only effective, but also more enjoyable. Tom, continuing to record the conversation, processed this information. Interested in the chronology of Tanya's actions, Tom asked if her participation in such actions began before Pete appeared. Tanya, expressing impatience with Tom's questions, revealed that she began such actions at the company's Christmas party a year after joining Cromerica, emphasizing her commitment to this approach over time. "Wait, are you sleeping with the boss too? Art Vandally?" Tom asked in surprise. "Are you sleeping with the spectacle too, Art Vandally?" Tom asked in surprise. "Yes, Tom, Art, Pete, Bill, anyone from the team who can help me advance my career. It's not worth revealing anything to me, and it's easy for me to manipulate you men when I can lead you to my desires, especially you. Show a little cleavage and I can direct you where I need to go," she said, even now thinking that you understood everything. "We informed Art of our location when we came here. Now he is gathering the rest of the team, preparing an excuse for our absence. People will have to promote their offer without us, but all the efforts with purchasing managers should pay off. What should I do?" He thought. "Oh, damn it, why not?" "Additional efforts," Tom provoked. "You've always been persistent, Tanya. It was so easy that I wouldn't even want to call it an effort," she laughed. "Some kind of joke, right? Was the worst intimate experience wonderful for me? At the conference with the customers, everything was clear with the men. We had to be more creative with Brenda, the only woman on the selection committee. It's funny, I even managed to seduce a woman, but I planted Pete to spice it up. She was interested in trying it. When we started working together after the contract was signed, I promised her even more fun, and yes, our team of choice is already insured. Why all this history? I mean, if everything is already set up, why such a harsh tactic?" Tom asked. "It's Pete's fault, you idiot. I told him to calm down, that I would come home and satisfy you, and I would arrive in time. But he still had to be aggressive. That's what we got. Now, instead of being the face of the winning team, I have to deal with Art again. As I said, it can be fixed, but it will slow down my progress. You wouldn't pay that little for me," she said. "Maybe not," Tanya replied, "but I would have caught the plane anyway." "Well, you're definitely not going out now," he said. Remembering how Pete was so aware of the situation, he decided that Tanya should have a transmitter. Remembering how Pete was so aware of the situation, he decided that Tanya should have a transmitter. "Art, are you listening? I'm going to call the police. I'm sure there are several federal crimes here, and we haven't even started investigating contract fraud yet. This is a federal contract, isn't it, Tanya?" Tom asked rhetorically. "Yes, the feds disapprove of this, as you put it, efforts. I'm sure you have excellent lawyers, Art, but maybe there is an alternative. He left it in the air. A moment later, Tanya's phone rang, the melody of greeting the head. Art, she asked into the phone. Sure, I'll turn you on. Tom. Art's voice came over the speaker. First, let me apologize to you. Pete's actions were a gross violation of conscience. I can assure you that the council will carry out his punishment decisively. Thanks, Art. It calms me down. I am glad to see that you and the commission take the attack and fraud seriously. Tom, these are all unfortunate circumstances. Lawyers will cash in, but no one wants to disrupt the status quo. We'll pay the fine. Pete and Bill will do community service, but in the end you'll get divorced and become twice as poor, Art explained in a businesslike tone. Do I hear a hint in this story, Art? Tom asked. Tanya always said you were the smarter of the two of you. Still, I'm glad I hired Tanya. Yes, Tom, there is clearly a hint in this story, Art continued. Tom, we, Cromerica, pushed you aside in your wife's affections, and when you found out and asked questions, you were treated particularly rudely. The most vulgar manners. Shocking, Tom interjected. Tom, Art continued, instead of calling the police, as you put it, what if we come to an agreement? I just sent a picture to Tanya's phone, not mine, but one of my tech guys. They say that the pictures disappear after viewing. Take a look. Perhaps this will restore goodwill. Tanya opened the picture and turned the phone to Tom. He saw the words Bank of Grand Cayman and the number. A very large room. And when will it be introduced? Tom asked. It's already there, Tom. You have an email with the account number. Tom, today has been a terrible day for you. I understand that making this decision is difficult and filled with emotional turmoil. It is undeniable that Tanya is an attractive woman. However, emotions alone cannot be converted into financial stability. Tom agreed, mimicking Art's refined speech pattern, acknowledging that Cromerica will cover the expenses of his divorce. There is no chance for reconciliation. We all agree on that. Tanya will file for divorce and demand her personal belongings and retirement funds. After a brief pause, Tom contemplated his options. On one hand, he could stand firm on his principles and expose the entire sordid situation, letting the consequences fall where they may. On the other hand, he could simply walk away. Art had given him 5 million reasons to consider the latter. Art, does Cromerica have a medical staff? Tom inquired. Indeed, Tom. We have some physicians on retainer, Art replied. Tom responded, good. Load a few into a limo and send them over here to pick up your team. Art sought confirmation. So, we are in agreement then. Tom's response was curt. Tanya who? Art concurred. Precisely. Art finally asked, are we done, Tom? Tom bid his farewell. Goodbye, Art, and ended the call. He put away his phone, turned off the recording app, and returned it to his pocket. I knew you would eventually see things our way, Tom. We can still maintain a friendship with added benefits once all of this is over, she said, attempting her most winning smile. However, even her radiant smile couldn't hide the effects of her injured nose. Her eyes were turning black, and dried blood stains were visible under her nose, extending down to her chin. Tom found the sight comical and couldn't help but smile. Misinterpreting his smile as agreement, Tanya leaned in for a kiss. Tom swiftly extended his right hand, preventing her advance and gently pushing her back until she landed on the couch with a thud. Disgusted, he questioned her desire for a kiss, leaving Tanya hurt and looking up at him. Firmly declaring his decision, Tom insisted that she retrieve whatever belongings she wanted by the following day. As he walked towards the door, he stopped next to Bill, asking about his injured foot. Dismissive of Bill's complaints, Tom delivered a swift kick to his groin, causing Bill to curl up in pain and moan. Approaching Pete, who had managed to sit up, Tom assured him that he would not physically harm him. Relieved, Pete smiled momentarily, but his expression quickly faded when Tom's foot applied pressure to his groin. Rolling onto his side, Pete winced in pain as he watched Tom exit the room. Tom got into his car, uncertain of his destination, but aware that food and shelter were paramount on the hierarchy of needs. He grabbed a burger from a takeout place, checked into a Red Roof Inn just outside of town, near the freeway, and fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Despite enduring various injuries, he rose early the next morning and reluctantly got out of bed. While preparing coffee in his motel room, his phone chimed, capturing his attention. The text message was from an unknown number, and he opened it eagerly. "Sorry for yesterday, I can meet. TGIF at the mall, around noonish. I'll wave you over to the bar seats." "I'll be there," he replied, pouring the lukewarm coffee into a paper cup. Enthusiastically, he set up his laptop, preparing for some online banking. Reflecting on his college days, a time before his relationship with Tanya, Tom remembered his economics professor's advice to maintain an offshore account for unforeseen circumstances. With the professor's guidance, he had established a bank account in the Cayman Islands, which he affectionately referred to as his go-to-hell fund. Over the past decade, he diligently contributed to it, accumulating an impressive sum of nearly $50,000. Tom felt a sense of pride, knowing that his go-to-hell fund was about to receive a significant boost. Tom accessed the secure websites of both banks and, using his passcode and several keystrokes, transferred the majority of Cromerica's payment into his personal account, leaving $100,000 in the original account. After showering, changing, and getting ready, he set off to meet the mystery texter. Tom arrived at TGIF just past noon. As he entered, he noticed a man waving him over. The man appeared to be around Tom's age, well-dressed and attractive. Tom approached him and said, "I believe you sent me a text." The man began, "I'm sorry for how things turned out. I'm here to tell you who I am and my connection to Tanya." "Start with your name and your relationship with Tanya," Tom requested. The man responded, revealing his backstory. "I used to be on her team. I left the Army after 8 years due to injuries sustained in action and underwent a lengthy recovery before being medically discharged. I joined Cromerica around 6 months ago and was assigned to Pete's team about 3 months ago. When I mentioned working for Tanya to a friend, we realized we had a mutual acquaintance who asked me to watch out for Tanya as a favor. Everything was great at first. I was warmly welcomed by the team. But I soon realized why. It's been about 2 months since Tanya came up to me. She was extremely attractive and, attractive. But when I asked her about the ring, she just smiled and said that you agreed with it. I disagreed and told her about it. From that moment on, I fell out of favor. After I turned her down, I was assigned only unwanted tasks, and all I got from Pete was grief. I called our mutual friend and told him about Tanya, who came up to me. He told me about you and thought that taking his wife out for sale for money was contrary to the image of the man he knew. He thought there was more to it than Tanya said, and that you should be aware. Pete sent me a photo when they were trying to lure me into the team, a kind of prize that I could expect if I joined them. Let's just say that I disagree with their methods. I quit yesterday and sent you a message." "What friend?" Tom asked. "Troy Baker. If I hadn't met Troy," I replied and was silent for a moment. "Let's just say that he helped me when I was a rookie lieutenant. I have 1 or 2 debts to him. And do we both have them?" Tom agreed. "What are you going to do?" the stranger asked. Art explained everything to me. I can involve the police, and yes, Bill, Pete, and even Tanya will have legal problems. But with his lawyers, it will only end in trouble. We made a deal. Maybe you'll think I'm for sale, and maybe you're right about something. But they stole from me the only thing that was irreplaceable. If I can't get them to pay legally, then at least I can get them to pay in some other way. It won't bring Tanya back, but I think I'll find that she's less irreplaceable than I thought. I already have a trip planned. Tell Troy thank you for everything. I'm not going back to work anymore. And you? Tom finally asked. Well, Troy always thought highly of Baxter Incorporated. Now that you're gone, they might need another engineer. Baxter's requirements for business activity are slightly different from those of Tinya's team. Tom smiled. After demonstrating his agreement with the arrangement, the stranger stood up, followed by a similar movement on Tom's part. They left without exchanging a word. The following Monday, Tom had just completed the check-in process for a flight to Costa Rica. Thinking about the upcoming vacation in Tamarindo, he headed for the entrance. When he noticed the mailbox, he took an envelope from his pocket, addressed to the Washington Department of Justice. Inside the envelope was a flash drive with a recording that he thought might be of interest to them. Considering the possibility that Art's lawyers might not be as strong as expected, Tom dropped the envelope into a drawer and continued to go through security checks. Update: 9 months later, sitting at his usual table in a cafe, Tom received a letter from Anna, who brought him his beer. "Thank you, dear," he said, lifting the bottle to his lips. Holding the envelope, he wondered who had found it. He did not find it difficult to hide. Finding him in a small town on the Pacific coast of northern Costa Rica would require resources inaccessible to an ordinary person. My first thought was that Art's people had found him. After leaving the envelope at his house for a couple of days, he was pretty sure that there was no bomb in it. But it's better to be careful. "Carlos," Tom shouted to the cafe owner. "Do you have a knife?" "Yes, Senor Tom." Tom handed the envelope to Carlos and took a few steps back. It's always better to be careful, he thought as Carlos cut open the envelope. He handed it to Tom, who thanked him, took another sip from the beer bottle, and turned the envelope over. Several sheets of paper fell on the table. Taking one of them, which had a note saying, "I think this will be interesting for you," and a phone number, Tom thought that Troy would be able to find it. He had enough resources. You can live with it. Turning over another piece of paper, he saw a copy of a newspaper article with a photo. The photo depicted Pete, Bill, Tanya, and Betty being led out of the building by Cromerics in handcuffs. The headline in the article read, "4 accused of multi-million-dollar fraud." He smiled. Maybe Art's lawyers aren't as cool as he thought, he told himself, despite the fact that his Spanish was weak and English was not widely spoken. He liked to hear English spoken, even if he was talking to himself. "Anna, another beer, please," he said, holding up his empty bottle. "Yes, Mr. Tom." "Thank you, Anna," he said, accepting the beer, took a sip and looked out at the deep blue Pacific Ocean.